So per the charter, on the first meeting of the term, the mayor presides until there is a president and vice president and secretary of the board that are elected in this first meeting. And so after I swear in the new members and we start the meeting and go through nominations and elections, then I will hand it over to the new president. Very grateful to see everyone here. And in particular, very grateful to Dr. Abby Benitez and Dr. Orlando Yarborough for stepping up to an incredibly important role here today. And for many, many days to come, you are brave, and your dedication to our young people is something that I am sure we will see throughout the many meetings in the future. So thank you for stepping up, and thank you for joining us along this journey. If I could ask you both to raise your right hand and repeat after me. And why don't you go on mute, unmute yourselves just in case. I solemnly swear.
I solemnly swear
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
perform the duties of member of the Board of Education
perform the duties of the member of the Board of Education
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
and according to law,
and according to law,
and that I will at all times
at all times
strive to use the power entrusted to me
strive to use the power entrusted to me
as such officer for the best interest of the city.
For the best interest of the city.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and welcome to the Board of Education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to call the meeting to order and note for the record that I see Dr. Joyner, Mr. Wilcox, Yesenia Rivera, Mr. Fiore, I believe I see you there, Mashai Roman, Dr. Orlando Yarborough, and Dr. Abby Benitez here. And I still do not see Mr. Goldson
will not be joining us.
Okay. And I note for the record that we have a quorum present. Dr. Joyner, would you mind starting us off with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God bless America.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Before we open it up to nominations, I did want to take a moment to note the passing of two beloved members of the New Haven Public School community. Morrow Sheridan social studies teacher, Mr. Linnell Williams, and school psychologist, Lisa LaRoe. And I wanted to turn it over briefly to Dr. Tracy before we have a moment of silence to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor Elicker, and good afternoon, board. This is with heavy heart that I report the passing of these two awesome teachers and workers in New Haven Public Schools. I particularly know Mr. Williams very well. He's been in the system for almost 37 years, working hard, working to make sure that his students learn. Miss Lisa LaRoe, I understand, had been ill for a while, and then she also recently passed. So these two individuals, it's hard to lose people. It's very difficult moments for the schools and for central office staff when we have to lose our teachers and our workers. But we truly mourn their loss, and our prayers are with their families and their friends. So now let us bow our heads in a moment of silence.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tracy.
Yeah.
So I'd now like to move on to nominations, and I'd like to take these one by one. First, nomination for president, then the nomination for vice president, and then the nomination for secretary. So starting with president, are there any nominations for president of the Board of Education? I see Dr. Joyner.
Mr. Mayor, I nominate Yesenia Rivera for president of the New Haven School Board.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. So Yesenia Rivera has been nominated. Are there any other nominations for president of the Board of Education? Any other nominations? Any further nominations for president? Hearing none, the nominations for president are closed. There's one nomination on the table. Is there any discussion about the nomination? Dr. Joyner.
I think she's done a phenomenal job in a very difficult time. Her temperament, character, and work ethic is above what anybody would expect, particularly during these times. And she's also a product of our city and of our school board, of our school system. And I think she's been a phenomenal leader for us.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any other discussion about the nomination of President Rivera? Any other discussion? I'd just like to add my own comments there that I'm very grateful that President Rivera has agreed to do this again, because it's a huge role and responsibility and not an easy task at any time, but especially during this really challenging time. I'm very grateful for her public service. So if there's no other discussion, I will go through a roll call of the votes. If you support the nomination, please say yes. If you do not, please say no. Dr. Joyner.
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox.
Yes.
President Rivera, or Ms. Rivera.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Fiore.
Yes.
Ms. Roman.
Yes.
Mr. Yarborough, Dr. Yarborough.
Yes.
Dr. Benitez.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. Congratulations, President Rivera. Congratulations. I'd like to now open up the floor for nominations for Vice President of the Board of Education. Are there any nominations for Vice President of the Board of Education? I see Dr. Joyner again.
Mr. Mayor, I nominate Matthew Wilcox for Vice President of the School Board.
There's a nomination for Mr. Wilcox. Are there any other nominations for Vice President of the Board of Education? Any other nominations? Any further nominations? Hearing none, the nominations are closed. Are there any discussion? Is there any discussion on the nomination of Mr. Wilcox for Vice President? Ms. Rivera.
I'd just like to say it's been an honor working with Mr. Wilcox as Vice President. He's been a huge help behind the scenes. A lot goes into this. On the President, Vice President, and Secretary side, and Mr. Wilcox has definitely outdone himself in terms of his support. Thank you.
Thank you, President Rivera. Any other? Dr. Joyner.
James Brown was called the hardest working man in show business. Matt Wilcox is the hardest working man in school boards. He really, I can't say enough for how hard he works, and he's such a good human being.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Any other discussion? Mr. Fiore.
I just want to say I look forward to continue working with you both. It's been a pleasure, and I'm very excited for the new year.
Thanks, Mr. Fiore. Any other discussion? If I may myself, I think of two things when I think of Mr. Wilcox. First is and this is from my heart, the incredible attention to detail. I know that if there is one person that has dotted his I's and crossed his T's and knows the details, it is Mr. Wilcox. And that is incredibly valuable to the Board of Education, because while every board member does a lot of work. I know that Mr. Wilcox has spent an incredible amount of time ensuring that he's able to answer questions, particularly in his role as chair of the F&O committee, and that the information that he provides has strong integrity. And the second thing is you really follow your heart, Mr. Wilcox. And I've admired the fact that you've struggled personally. I've observed with many of the decisions that we've made, and one or two that have been particularly emotional. And there's been a lot of community passion around these decisions. And I admire that you're at every step of the way really trying to make the best decision and follow your ethical compass. Any other discussion about Mr. Wilcox in this nomination? Okay, so all those in favor, please say yes. If you do not support Mr. Wilcox's nomination as vice president, please say no. Let's go down this list again. Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
President Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore?
Yes.
Ms. Roman?
Yes.
Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. So congratulations, Mr. Wilcox. You are vice president. Nominations are now in order for secretary. Are there any nominations for secretary? President Rivera.
I'll nominate Dr. Joyner for secretary.
There's a nomination for Dr. Joyner for secretary on the floor. Are there any other nominations for secretary? Any other nominations for secretary? Seeing none, I will close the nominations. Is there any discussion on the nominations for secretary? President Rivera.
Just again, for me, it's been an honor working with Dr. Joyner. He is unbelievably smart in what he does. He's taken on the teaching and learning committee and have done great things with it. I'm excited again to be working with Dr. Joyner and Mr. Wilcox with the executive team. Thank you, Dr. Joyner.
Thank you, President Rivera. Any other discussion? Mr. Wilcox.
I'll just say that it's been a pleasure to serve with both President Rivera and Dr. Joyner in these roles, and I look forward to continuing that. Deeply respect not only their work, but the work of everybody on the board, including our recently departing members and our new members that are stepping in tonight. So looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Any other discussion on the nomination? Dr. Joyner, you truly given a lifetime and more of service, and you continue to give despite, I think, your wife's best advice. But we're grateful to you and your family for your service, not only in your professional capacity in the past, but now in your volunteer capacity on the board. It's a real sacrifice, and thank you for that. Seeing no other discussion, we will go to a vote for Dr. Joyner. If you support Dr. Joyner as secretary, please say yes. If you do not, please say no. Mr. Wilcox?
Yes.
President Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore?
Yes.
Ms. Roman?
Yes.
Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes.
Dr. Benitez?
Yes.
Dr. Joyner?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Congratulations, Dr. Joyner. You are the board secretary. So with that, my role as at least chair of this committee is over, and I will hand over the baton to Ms. Rivera.
Thank you, Mayor Elicker and colleagues for your support. I'm honored again to serve as president of the board. Dr. Joyner and Mr. Wilcox, did you want to say a few words?
Matt, you're the vice president, so.
May I ask the senior, turn up your mic a little bit, the senior, I can't hear you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, was there a question for me?
No, just if you wanted to say a few words. That's all.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Really? I thought I heard it now. Is that better?
That's
little-
better.
Okay, I guess I just have to hold up the mic. No, I was just saying if you just wanted to say a few words, I thank Mayor Elicker and colleagues for your support, and I'm honored to serve again as president of the board, and I just asked you and Dr. Jordan if you wanted to say anything.
I'll just say and reiterate what I said before, which is I look forward to serving this year, my last year on the board, and hope that we can continue to get some things done, and look forward to working with everybody. And if anybody needs something or has concerns they want to share with me, to please let me know. Thank you.
Dr. Joyner?
I think this is a fitting punctuation mark to my life. I've always wanted to be a teacher from the time I can remember, actually drawing on the ground, trying to teach kids in the neighborhood numbers and what have you. I've come through some real difficult periods in history. I grew up during the segregation period in North Carolina, and I've seen schools and all their various manifestations. And I think that we're in a critical period now, and we need a lot more help. We need a lot more help from parents. We need a lot more help from the kids themselves, particularly the older kids. I was in a school where if you were 16 years old and had a license, you could be a bus driver. And we didn't have subs. We would have older students take over classes when teachers were absent, even though they were rarely absent. I was also in a school that was separate and unequal, even though they said it was equal. It wasn't. But there was so much love and commitment in the community for education. We didn't look at what we didn't have, we looked at what we had. And so I'm hoping that the community can rise to the occasion and do the kind of work that we need to do together to help these kids understand how important education is, but as also how important character is. Because we now know that education is not synonymous with wisdom. It's not at all. And we also know that despite people's station in life, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do the right thing. So we're at a critical crossroads in American history. And the only thing we can do is what we can do here locally, but we should do the very best we can to try to come out of this crisis, multiple crises, and make New Haven a shining light as it has been in the past, and hopefully will continue to be. And God bless all of you, because I believe that every single person that served on this board has done their very best. And the worst thing they can say about us is that we had democratic processes. Even though we might have disagreed with one another, we still had a democratic process. And I'm hoping that the federal and state governments going forward will have the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox and Dr. Joyner. So before we move on to the rest of the agenda, I just want to move up the President's report before public participation. I asked Dr. Jackson and Mr. Conway to join us for a few minutes because for some of us, it was extremely unexpected that the December meeting would be their last meeting as board members. I thought, as well as others on the board, that there would be a second reading before the new members would be appointed. But as you know, that wasn't the case. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to, I wanted to have the opportunity to thank them publicly and personally, and to give others the opportunity to do so as well if they wish. Dr. Jackson and Mr. Conway, thank you for your service to the community. Volunteering on this board is not an easy task. It's a lot of hard work and many times, as we know, a thankless job. So I thank you both for everything you've done. And with that, I'll open the floor to anyone else if you'd like to say a few words. Yeah,
I just wanted to echo that. I mean, we have spent hours and hours and hours and hours together, Mr. Conway and Dr. Jackson MacArthur. And there's been some tough conversations, but you've always followed your heart, and you've really pushed in particular, a lot of the concerns that have come from some members of the community and elevated those conversations. And it hasn't been easy for any of us, but I think in the end we've landed in a better place because of your passion and the energy that you've put into everything here. Can't underscore how grateful I am for your dedication. And I know you're not going far because I run into you around town. Dr. Jackson MacArthur and I just ran into each other yesterday at Home Depot. So I'm sure that you both will find many ways, both in your personal capacity and probably in some committee role or some formal capacity in the future, to continue your impact on the city. Thank you for everything you've done and you will do in the future.
Thank you.
Dr. Jackson.
Yesenia, thank you so much. She's always, so, you know, I'm going to be the one to say, you know, women put a certain touch on things. And I really appreciated the call that I got from her to say, hey, or the text, hey, could you hop on? I always thoughtful, even within those hard conversations. Mayor Elliker, I think that it is very important for people to know that we do spend a lot of time together and we have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. And because everyone is so accomplished, so bright, so brilliant, we literally, you know, we hack it out, and you do. But at the end of the day, because all of us want the same result, we want for our district to be better, not just for the kids, for our employees, for our administration, everyone that sets foot in our district want to be better. So at the end of hacking it out, hashing it out, you know, tears, being mad, whatever you want to call it, we get to the point where we say, okay, this is what the decision is, and we're going to move on. And we always move on, and I feel like we move on and we grow. And for me, this has been an amazing experience. I've grown so much from working with the group of people, not just on the board, but also in the district. Even me and Dr. Tracy, we have had our tense moments, but as Black women who lead, both of us are very committed to what we do, very committed with our vision, and we push our vision. But at the end of the day, it was all for the betterment of this district. And I have a lot of respect for you, Dr. Tracy, even more so because you allowed me to be me, and for whatever that's worth. So thank you very much for that. And Dr. Joyner, who I've known almost all my life, has always been there to prod me, scold me, praise me, whatever I needed. And I appreciate that too. And I know it's never gonna stop. So I'm very thankful for that. And to Mayor Elliker, who, you know, he and I met him long before when he was running before. And I always thought, you know, he had a big heart and he had a lot of determination. And, you know, in working with you since you've been mayor, I was not on his team, but he still worked with me without bias, with honesty, and with integrity. And I really appreciate that because both of us are dedicated to the city. So to you all, thank you. You know, I could talk all night. I appreciate it. And I cannot say enough about Tiffany Jackson, who really, I could not have made anything happen on governance without her. So if anything with governance, do not take her and Jasmine away, please. Major plus there. And Larry, hey, what can I say? We did our thing and it was a pleasure serving with you. So that's it for me.
I just, first of all, I want to say thank you, Dr. Jackson. I did many of the things that you said. I want to welcome the new board members, Dr. Yarborough and my friend Dr. Abby Benitez. Congratulations on your new appointment. Keep the children, keep the students first, and you'll always win. Dr. Joyner, thank you for your wisdom and your direction and supervision that you've helped me on this board. We've had many conversations, both publicly and privately. Matt Wilcox, I can't say enough for you. I ditto what everybody else has said about you, and thank you for your support. It was a pleasure serving under you for FNO. Whoever takes over food service, just make sure that you keep that committee, keep that committee as a priority. I want to thank Gail, her staff, Mr. Lamb, and Cheryl. They've been very supportive. And Yesenia, thank you so much for giving me that text to come on and close out like that. Close out like this. It was a class act. Mayor, you got a major job. Thank you for all that you do, and I appreciate your kind words as well. Dr. Tracy and the rest of the staff, thank you, and I'll be seeing you guys. My boots are still on the ground. Thank you. Oh, and last but not least, students, please continue. Anthony, please continue, and Miss Ramon, please continue. Let your voice be heard. Your voice is extremely, extremely important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Joyner, Mr. Wilcox, and then Mayor Elder.
I actually believe that the measure of a man is how he treats his wife and his children more than anything. And if there's one person in this community that is a poster person for that, particularly in terms of how he's raised his sons, is Larry Conaway. I met Larry Conaway when he was a student at Southern Connecticut. Actually, I think I met him before then when that lady jumped on my back in New Britain High School at a basketball game. Yeah. But he's always been such a warm, respectful person. And I think the greatest manifestation of his effort is in his kids. And also the respect that he shows for family life and the work that he does that nobody knows about in terms of philanthropy to help people who need help. And I would credit that to his mother and father, two Georgia natives, and his mom, especially, who passed away a few years ago, who raised a wonderful son and taught him to give back. He accepted the torch when she passed it.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Wilcox?
I'm not always good with the words, but I did want to say a few of them here. And I just want to first thank Dr. Tamiko Jackson MacArthur. It's been a pleasure serving with you. I deeply appreciate the phone calls and the conversations we've been able to have. I hope if you think I need to be called out on something, you'll give me a call and try to set me straight, make me listen and think different. I deeply appreciate that. It was never your job to do so, but you took the time and I appreciate that. And also Mr. Larry Conaway, I always have respected you, not just for your service on the board, but for your service to the kids in New Haven that need another chance, even if nobody else wants to give them one. And as someone who has a son that graduated from one of our alternative programs, thanks to Mr. Conaway and a host of other people that don't give up on any kids, even one as slappy as mine was. I appreciate that. And I always will remember that and hope I can live up to that with my time on this board. And again, you also have my number. And if there's something I need to do or get set straight on, please give me a call. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Wilcox, Mayor Elder, and then Dr. Tracy.
I already said my piece. I was just waving.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Dr.
Well,
Tracy?
let me say that many may not know that even though we go at it sometimes behind the scenes, Dr. MacArthur and I are very cordial with each other. And she always reminds me of when she wanted her children into my school there in King Robinson, and I had to leave. So, everyone serves the best way he or she can for a better New Haven. And we will not always agree, but we must always respect one another. So those things have happened. And I wish Dr. MacArthur well as she moves on to other things. I'm sure the time she's reclaiming to take care of business. Larry and I go way back, working as colleagues in New Haven Public Schools. Thank you for coming onto the board and serving New Haven Public School. Thank you. And you don't believe you're finished yet, right? I don't think so.
Nah.
I knew that. I knew that. So once an educator, always an educator. So come back over Macedonia and help us. That's biblical terminology.
I
know exactly what it is.
We're not talking about the church in Ansonia.
I know we're not.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Fiore?
I just wanted to express my gratitude as well as the students' gratitude in New Haven. You've done so much for the students and it has not gone unnoticed. And I just want to say thank you from all the students in New Haven.
Thank you. Okay. Next, I just want to thank and welcome our new board members, Dr. Yarborough and Dr. Benitez. Thank you for deciding to accept Mayor Eliker's nomination and joining us now on this work. I'll ask my colleagues, so I'll ask you all to be thinking about the committees that you'd like to serve on and let me know. I'd like to name chairs and vice chairs to all the committees, hopefully by our next meeting. So for now, we'll keep the committees as they are. There are the three big committees that were chaired by Dr. Jackson and Mr. Conway. So those will be the priority, and I'll be connecting with each of you on those and make that one. Those are governance, food service, and facilities maintenance. So we'll talk offline about those. And then just as we move on, for the benefit of the new board members, just a reminder to please use the raise hand function in Zoom when you'd like to speak, and then wait to be called on. I promise I'll get to everyone. If you've already spoken on the topic, I'll call on others first who have not yet spoken, and then we'll come back around. This will be a better chance to speak on that and that's being discussed. Okay. So we'll go to public participation. Dr. White.
Okay. Dr. Joyner, are you ready?
Yep, we got the timer.
Okay. Our first speaker is Kim Sibley. Kim Sibley.
Before speaking, please start speaking immediately after your name has been announced. When you actually use up the time of 3 minutes, I will say time, and I would ask you to complete your sentence and be respectful and allow the next person to come on. Thank you. You can start now.
We'll move on to Leslie Blateau, and if Ms. Sibley keeps her hand up, we'll try again. Next speaker is Leslie Blateau. Ms. Blateau, you may begin.
Thank you, Dr. White. Good evening. Welcome to the new board members, Dr. Benitez and Dr. Yarborough, and thank you, of course, to Dr. MacArthur and Mr. Conaway for your service. I'm Leslie Blateau, newly elected president of the New Haven Federation of Teachers. And first, on behalf of the Federation, I'd like to wish my predecessor, David Ciccarella, the very best as he prepares for his retirement. We would like to thank him for his decades of service to our union, our teachers, and our school district, and we wish him and his family the best in the years to come. Next, I would like to highlight and recognize New Haven's educators and school staff, some of whom are sick or quarantined, and many others who have been doing some very hard work right now to keep our schools running. We know how challenging a job teaching can be, especially during a pandemic, and even more so now during this latest surge. Often the joy balances the challenge, but I think we can agree that the stress of teaching right now can interfere with that joy. With that said, I'd like to reassure teachers that N95 and KN95 masks are continuing to be delivered to your schools Test kits are available if you have symptoms or have been exposed to a known COVID case. And we recognize and are grateful for the efforts of both the city and the Board of Ed to make sure these masks and tests are in place. And I ask also that this board and our New Haven community keep up the pressure on the state right now. The state continues to limit New Haven's ability to shift to remote learning with positivity rates close to 25%. We urge the state to deliver more resources to our city. We need weekly PCR testing in our buildings. We need continued access to test kits and masks. We need to improve access to vaccines for students and families in school buildings. And we need to ensure that there's a full-time nurse in every one of our buildings. The demands of in-person learning during this surge are testing our system. And to protect teachers and ensure we can do the jobs we've been hired to do, I urge our community to make our voices heard at the state level. And despite this stress, we know that at some point we will shift out of crisis mode and get back to the longer term visioning. And the New Haven Federation of Teachers is ready to partner with the district, the city, and the state to think about how we can best support and listen to our teachers so they remain with us in New Haven. One idea that will not only help current teachers, but also build a pipeline for future teachers is to increase incentives for and create a system to support building level substitutes in the long term. One of many ideas we're ready to talk about. But we need overall to reassure our current and future educators through our creative and purposeful actions. And I am optimistic about our potential for collaboration on these issues. Thank you, Dr. Joyner, for letting me finish my sentence. And thanks everyone for the opportunity to speak this evening. I appreciate it.
Madam President, that concludes the hands that are raised at this up. Well, one just popped up. I'm not, I'll give it a quick second. Yes, we have one more. We have Ms. Hopes McFadden. You may begin speaking.
Good evening. This is Kirsten Hopes McFadden. I just want to say that my emotions are really all over the place tonight. Mr. Williams was my buddy and my colleague. I teach 8th grade social studies at ESUMS, and he taught 7th and 8th grade social studies at Morris Sheridan. So we spent many meetings together in CIA and, many meetings together. And he always liked to remind me that he was from Chicago and they better not mess with him. So I hope he is resting in eternal peace. But that really hit me this weekend. I'm here to talk. I want to thank Dr. Jackson and Mr. Conaway for their service, if they're still listening. And I'd like to welcome the new board members as well. I'd like to echo a lot of things that our president said with regard to the state of the schools. I just want to know, I understand that the city is really depending on what the state does. But I just don't want that to be to the point where we are not using common sense and causing unnecessary illness in the community just because the state, the governor is looking to be reelected, and trying to keep schools open to be babysitters. There's no real education happening if staff is not there and students are not there. It's just babysitting. And that is not what we signed up for. I know questions have been asked about what the metrics are about, when we can go to remote. And I would like to also know, what's going on with that. I know conversations are happening. I would like to also say that we follow the protocols. I had an incident today where administration is not being told what teachers are being told as far as meetings are concerned. And so in-person meeting was attempted to happen today. And we had to step in and keep that from happening. We have to try to stay as safe as possible. I encourage people to read the core principles from the CTAFT about having safe schools. I believe the email was sent to all of the board members that were there before tonight, and the superintendent and mayor, please look at those. And I'm really concerned about there being enough testing. And I was wondering if we could have like a COVID sniffing dog or whatever we can do to keep these schools safe. I just find it really ironic today that I got a message from my doctor that told me that he's going to switch my appointment to a video appointment because it's unsafe to come into a doctor's office. However, we're saying it's safe to be in schools. I just don't even understand. I can't even wrap my mind around that. This is a doctor's office where they sanitize constantly. It will be a one-on-one appointment, and that's unsafe. My final statement is we're Black on Wednesday. We're Black on Wednesday to show that we are protesting what the governor is doing. Thank you.
Madam President, that concludes the hands.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner and Dr. White. Moving on to the action items, the approval of the board meeting minutes for December 13th, 2021. I will entertain a motion to accept.
Motion to accept.
Yes, I move that we accept the December 13th minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, we vote on accepting the meeting minutes for the December 13th meeting. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Ms. Haman,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and yes as well, and so those minutes pass. Personnel report, Dr. Tracy.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Good evening, board. I think I inadvertently left off a name initially that was sent to your packet, but we resent it to you, of a person who is information only, Miss Julie Browning. So I'm not sure, even though it's not action item, do we vote on that to put that on there, or we just put it on?
An action item.
Can't hear you, President.
It's not an action item, so we don't have to vote.
Okay, so let me move on to the action item that we have. I'm asking for the board to accept, we call it the blue sheet, to accept the personnel report that we have this evening. We have a couple of teacher appointments and paraprofessional appointments and some few teachers. So please accept the report as we have given. There's also a termination. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes, I'd like to make a motion, and that is that we accept and approve the action items of the superintendent's personnel report.
Dr. Joyner,
Second the motion.
any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the personnel report. Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Mom,
Okay,
she's still on, Ms. Haman. Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
yes, Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and personnel reports pass.
okay, Madam President, so I need to mention with the information only item, there are some retirees on this that I need to make mention of, who have given years of service to New Haven. I haven't even added up the years together, the service they have provided to New Haven Public Schools. We have Miss Julie Browning, Assistant Principal of Benjamin Jepson School. All these people have served 30 years or more. Tony Edmonds Walker is finally throwing in the towel and is retiring from adult education as assistant principal. She has served there and has served New Haven in varied capacities. Mr. Kenneth Matthews, our supervisor of math, is also moving on. Miss Diane Spence, the principal of County West Hills High School, which should also be a great loss to County West Hills High School. But Diane is moving on and we wish them well. And Mr. David Chicorella, after serving the union for over 15 years and 40 years in New Haven Public Schools. These are long haulers. I mean, they give their time, really. And Miss Rosemary Linebarger, here in Impaired East Rock Community School. And we have some teachers, Miguel Benitez, and several other teachers who have, no, these are resignations. But these are the retirees I want to hold up front. That's many years supporting New Haven Public Schools. We started to look at our chart to see where people stand right now, to see how many more may be leaving us because they've reached that point. And so I want to lift my hat to these folks for all the years that they've given to New Haven Public School. They must have loved their jobs to have stayed here so long, working for our students. And that completes my report for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Fury?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear one of the parts. Did you say someone was leaving from County West Hills?
Let me find it, Anthony. Hold on.
I apologize.
Yes, it's a yes, Miss Diane Spence, the current principal.
Oh wow, she was.
Yeah, that's what I say. Oh wow.
Wow, yeah, she was my principal. If I may, I just want to speak on her behalf.
Sure.
Lovely principal, and she was always there for me and her students, and she was just a big role model to me and the students. So I just want to thank her for her time.
Make sure you reach out to her, Anthony. She's still there.
Definitely will.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Tracy, Mr. Fury. Finance and Operations Committee, Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you very much. Before I get started, just for the benefit of the new members and as a reminder to everybody else that if I always ask before we move these items, if there's anything people would like to move separately, either because of extensive questions or that they want to vote on it for whatever reason, vote on it separately, or if they have to recuse themselves based on some connection with the organization. So if you are ever in a situation where you would like something like that done, please let me know ahead of time or when I ask before we move the items in the meeting. The second thing I want to point out is there is a new or different kind of item than we typically see. And this is the energy compliance incentive. And this is actually going to be income into the district, but we have to have this agreement with United Illuminating so that they can seek the $160,000 plus with incentives because of the fine design of the Obama school was such that it meets the requirements for these rebates or incentive rebates. So that's kind of a different one, but I just wanted to point out what that was. So I have an item here that I need to recuse myself on. So I've asked President Rivera to handle the first item, which is agreement number 6, which is with Clifford Beers. As everybody by now I'm sure knows, my spouse works for Clifford Beers on a federally funded grant project, so I recuse myself on anything to do with that. So President Rivera.
Mr. Wilcox, agreement 6 is with Arts for Learning Connecticut. Is that the one? Yep, I see it. Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve agreement 6 with Arts and Learning Connecticut to provide after-school arts program at Clemente and County Schools from from January 10th, 2022 to June 30th, 2022, in the amount not to exceed $4,999.95. The agreements with Perfect Careers Guidance Clinic to provide a winter recess and spring resource camp.
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none, we'll vote on agreement number 6. Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Accused.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Ms. Roman, Mrs. Roman, Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion, and that would be that we approve the one abstract, the one energy compliance incentive, the remaining 14 agreements, and the one purchase order.
For a second,
Second.
any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll vote on the remainder of the FNL items. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Ms. Roman,
Yes.
Mr. Fiore,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. FNL items pass. Okay, so we move on to the students report.
Michelle, would you like to start it off? Or I could. I'll start off. Okay.
Okay, you can start.
Sorry. Overall, the time back has been good. I think students are in general happy to be back, but also I think it's really split. Some students want to go back home to digital. Some students feel like for their education they want to stay in person. But I think there is a general agreement right now that there is a lot of shortages in the schools and that there is problems with students feeling like they're not getting all the resources that they should be. I think the main consistent thing, the majority of it, I should say, is that students want to stay home despite their own personal feelings about it. I myself, I personally want to carry out my last year of high school physically, but knowing what's really happening, I think it would be better to go back to digital learning. I recognize that this isn't the board's decision, but I do think that students are advocating for some form of intervention to get online learning back. And that is it. Thank you.
I also would like to say, I agree with Anthony on that. I don't want to spend the rest of the year online, but I feel like for the time being, we should be digital because of, cases are becoming very high. And then, when someone catches it, then the people around them have to quarantine. So it's like a lot of students are out and a lot of people are being exposed. But it's not something that we want long lasting, like how it was last year. We want this to be very temporary because we care about everyone's safety. But we understand the circumstances and what you guys are doing, because we would have to make up the days at the end of the year if it wasn't a part of the governor's 180-day. I'm not sure the thing, but yeah.
I should add the detail that students do want to go digital on the circumstance that it's only for a 2-week time period. They definitely do not want to go back to digital learning for the rest of the school year.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore, Ms. Ramon. Personality, Dr. Bruno?
Did you just call on me?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Survey report.
I do have a report, and what I'd like to ask is for Ms. Velasquez to send the minutes to the board as a whole so that I don't have to go all over this. It's really difficult to talk about the policy work we're doing or trying to do without talking about the context that we're working in. And from hearing from the students and hearing from the newly elected president of the union, and also looking at what's going on across the country in terms of politicians at the top saying what will and will not happen, I'm a little concerned about it. And the reason I'm concerned is that I think that the people that are in the best position to make decisions about the conduct of schools are the people that are closest to the problem. And that would be teachers, students, age parents, school staff, and the mayor of the particular city that we're in. And I remember when I voted early on to close school, I got a lot of attention for it. But one of the things I said, if they can live, they can learn. And I really believe that we cannot take remote learning off the table, period. That you have to give, when you're in a war, you have to use all the weapons at your disposal. And I'm for keeping schools open. But I'm also for giving school systems as many tools that they can, that we can give them so that we can do that safely. And by that, I agree with everything that Leslie Blateau said about testing. I know in California, I have students out there, they're not letting anybody in the school that's testing positive. And from a scientific standpoint, you can understand that, because if you don't have any control over whether a positive or negative person can be led into a school, then as Mashai said, you're really opening up to spread. And so I think the governor should rethink this whole notion of no remote learning, because quite frankly, if he doesn't, the problem will take care of itself, because you're not going to have staff. And it also appears to me that people don't understand the ripple effect. If a teacher's kindergarten child gets sick and they're the only person in that child's life, what is that teacher going to do? And if you have multiple children that get sick, or if you have elderly parents, what is that person going to do? So we must have testing to determine the population of kids in any particular area, the population of human beings in any particular area, whether or not they're infected, so that we can do the right thing. So yes, let's keep schools open, but let's assure the people that work in the schools and the people in the community that we have used every scientifically based measure to prevent the spread of the disease. There's still a lot that we don't know about Omicron as a variant. And even though Pfizer says that they're going to have a vaccine by March, it takes a long time from the vaccine for the person to become strong enough, for the immune system to become strong enough. And I know Orlando knows more about that than I do, because he's a geneticist. But Abby and I both have been principals. And I think we both realized the impact of the conduct of one person in a school. And whether that person is infected, whether that person is acting out, or what have you, all it takes is one person in a group to create problems and challenges. And not only are we battling the disease, but we're also dealing with some behavioral issues in schools that threaten the teaching and learning climate in school. And we cannot allow students who are misbehaving to make it bad for the entire school. And that is going on. And Dr. Tracy has given principals notice that they cannot accept that. And we can't. So we are dealing with a very challenging teaching and learning climate. At the same time, we're continuing to do our work to try to create a policy that will address evidence-based practices in teaching and learning. And Ms. Velasquez, as well as all the subject area supervisors and the assistant superintendents, have been working together as a great team to revise policies that date back to the 1990s. This is a different population we're teaching. The conditions have changed in the community. A lot of our institutions are not what they used to be. And there's a greater burden on schools than at any time in American history. We're the largest restaurant in the community. We're the largest transportation hub in the community. We provide mental health services. We provide, in some instances, medical services. And we're kind of expected to do everything, but we're only measured on the basis of one thing, test scores. And that's a misuse of testing anyway. I don't know how in the world we allowed that to get to this point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to side with the president of the union, with the students, with the teachers, and with, I believe, all the members of this board, saying that we have to have mitigating protocols in place. We have to be able to test people that are going into our schools. We have to give our teachers the tools they need in order to be effective. And we have to send notice to people who would take advantage of this to vandalize, to hurt others and what have you, that's not something that we're going to tolerate, and that does not lend itself to the type of optimal learning climate that every child needs to learn and that every teacher needs to teach. And I think we have to have those discussions in our committee meeting. We're going to have the draft policy ready for you probably at the next meeting or no later than early February. But in the last meeting, and I'm hoping that Ms. Velasquez, we can show that not tonight, but at the next meeting, our students, our New Haven students, had an opportunity to, in some ways, demonstrate their ability to use art for the most prestigious, one of the most prestigious organizations in the country, maybe in the world. And that particular organization has our beloved Jessica Haxtell as its president. And that was how we started the meeting. You had students in the Yale Morse Chorale singing "This Is Me" from the Greatest Showman movie. The beauty of that is that all of those students spoke many different languages, and they were saying that in their language. And it was played at the general opening session of the annual convention of the National K-16 World Language Educators Association with 30,000 members. Jessica Haskell, who is a community resource, who is really one of the most brilliant and committed educators I've ever met in my life, is the president of the organization. She's one of ours. And of course, you know, the Teacher of the Year is one of ours. We've got some really good people in this system. Evelise Velasquez has been working diligently with other staff members to create state-of-the-art policies on instruction and all the proposed updates, which you'll be getting copies of if you don't have them already. But I want to end this by saying, and Mr. Wilcox, thank you for your timely intervention. Matt is a world-class librarian, and we need that knowledge as we build our book collection around the cultural diversity that we have in the system. And we're very lucky that we don't have people storming the doors talking about what we can and cannot teach. Because what we have to teach has to be the truth. No matter how beautiful it is, no matter how ugly it is, we have to teach the truth. And Matt, thank you for that. And I'm going to ask you to work side by side with me and the people in literacy to try to make sure that we do that in the most reputable way possible. And so that was one of the presentations. And Lynn is working on making sure that we have classroom libraries in every school, and that is unprecedented. We are also working on some science initiatives Richard Therian is another, Dr. Therian is another outstanding leader in his field. And he indicated in the meeting that this is the first time in a number of years that science has had those resources. And he's increasing the number of minutes or weeks for science instruction. And he's also pushing project-based learning. And he's also pushing programs that replace current materials that have support for Spanish-speaking students in special education, so that all of our students will be served. And amplifying Smithsonian, and you know that's a magic name in science, Smithsonian, two of the programs in particular. And if you come to a TNL meeting, you'll get a chance to ask questions about that. And it is a community, it is a committee of the whole. And I don't know if the Therian's presentation is online, but it was a phenomenal presentation, as well as that was given by Mrs. Brantley in consultation with one of our super teachers, Stephen Stasniak, who teaches English at Metropolitan Business Academy. He's a big independent reading buff, as is Ms. Breland at Hill House. And he actually dedicates 20 to 30 minutes per block to independent reading for his students. And he's really charismatic and a hardworking teacher. We need to make sure we keep people like that. And Lynn talked really about the importance of the building blocks of independent reading, vocabulary development, and writing across the content area. So we're going to have those books that are of high interest to our kids. And the reason that's important is that in times when like these, if a person has learned to read and appreciate the value of reading, then that person can do like a number of people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. That person can teach themselves. Marion Wright Edelman, when she would come home and her father would ask her if she had any homework, she would say no. He would say to her, assign yourself. And we have people on this board that have come up through backgrounds like that. And they understand the power of reading and thinking. But we need to have those resources, and we have them now. And it's a question of our students and our parents being appreciative enough and working hard enough to take advantage of it. So we can send you the minutes of the report. I can't capture the beauty and the passion of all the people that work together to make some of this stuff possible. But hopefully our new policy will have in it all the elements: independent reading, vocabulary development, writing across the curriculum, critical thinking, that make up an outstanding curriculum and instructional protocol system for children, particularly children who are born in difficult environments, for which education is the only way out. And I'm hoping one day that Dr. Yarborough will tell you his story, because it is a great story about perseverance, passion, and innate genius that was developed and nurtured. I hope you can do that one day. Thank you. Abby has a story too, by the way.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Questions for Dr. Jones?
Did you say my name, President?
No.
President Rivera?
Yet.
Okay.
I haven't yet. I just asked if there were any questions for Dr. Jones.
Okay.
Now I'm going to say your name, Dr. Tracy, Superintendent's report.
No, I'm not sleeping. I'm not sleeping. It's just that your voice is low.
No, I'm trying to hold the mic. I got to remember to hold the mic in front of the mouth.
We got to get you a production team.
Probably, and it's probably my headset is going back.
So is that for me to start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so before I start, we have, I'm asking for a board member to do a motion to add to the agenda Director Bond to speak on COVID issues.
So moved. I would like to add Director Bond to the agenda to speak on COVID issues.
Mr. Wilcox?
Second.
Any discussion? We'll vote on adding Director Bond for discussion. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Dr. Benitez, where is she?
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Ms. Haman,
The students have left.
students have left. Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well.
Okay, thank you so much. So Director Bond, you'll go after the quick reflection we'll have, then you'll go before the attendance report. I want to make these very quick. So I would be remiss if I did not talk about last week. Last week had been the most challenging week for us in New Haven Public Schools since the pandemic. I don't know, I must be texting some of the board members way up in the late night and early morning. They must have heard the ping because I'm sharing with them what's going on. We have never seen staff absences in this proportion. Now, normally on a Monday or a day prior to vacation, you may see at least 200 or so staff out, but we realized something was happening that was very abnormal. On Monday of last week, we had 548 staff absences. The next day, Tuesday, we had 515. And Wednesday, I had reported, I think it was 400 something, but then the numbers came in at 624 across the district. And today we had 394, so it's going back down. I made up my mind that if we had seen 624, we could not open school safely, to be honest with you. Everyone was stretched thin. Everyone from the classroom teachers, paraprofessionals, the supervisors from central office, the rest of administrators from central office, the principals, everybody was stretched thin to try to provide coverage. And I agree with the students that it was not the best, but we have to also remember that New Haven Public Schools, that we have issues with food insecurities, and that is not just about academic learning. We talk about servicing the whole child, correct? That means we're taking care of all the different pathways of our students, the linguistic, the physical, the cognitive, the social, emotional, all of those different pathways. So I understand that last week, much of the academics in many places did not happen. However, we cannot forget the importance of students socializing, being with their peers, rather than being home in front of a screen. I just want to underscore that it's important that students get together with their peers, and even though the academic section was disrupted, they still had a chance to be in school where they were also safe and working with their peers. And I want to thank the determined, dedicated, resilient staff, teachers, supervisors, paraprofessionals, administrators, custodians, security, food service, etc. We were able to open school on those very hard days. So what happened? We got together as a team at central office and started to look at what do. We knew that we're going to have some issues around school opening. Thanks to the team and Ms. Hannons and others, they came up with getting a Google Doc, going around to principals, put in your numbers, so live they could track the number of absences that were coming from across the district. We got a chance to see where they were coherent, which school had more, which school seemed abnormal. The school that seemed to have abnormal absences, then that's where you push in the support. Also flashed in my mind, why don't I pay the teachers to use their prep time if they so care to do that, to get that in? I reached out to Leslie, Miss Bapto, and told her, she asked about how much they would be paid. We discussed that. I asked the teachers, and many of them stepped up to the plate and utilized their prep time to support their colleagues' classroom. Now, that's New Haven working together. Can we sustain that? I don't think so. But they came to the defense of the children. It's all about these children and their needs. And someone is going to say, but Dr. Tracy, it's all about the teachers too. But first comes the students. And I'm going to say this, and I reiterate this. Had it not been for the students, none of us would have any job. There was no need for teachers, no need for administrators, no need for anyone. So it's all first about the students. In the past, we talk about the instructional core, the students, the staff, and the content. This week, the students take precedence right now. And I was glad that the staff came together to support the needs of the students. Now, the students may be concerned that they did not learn much. We understand that because no substitute teacher, and even us as central office substituting, can make up for what their teachers had planned for them. But it did open up our eyes to a number of things that I would not discuss here. So we continue to reach out, we continue to work to get our students supported, to get our staff supported. We, on Sunday last week, went out in the cold and distributed testing kits to our staff members who were probably exposed or were symptomatic or who had to keep up with the weekly testing. We did that at King Robinson School. And then we continue this week to send out masks to schools. And we also deliver the test kits to school, but there are parameters to these test kits. Only if you're symptomatic or exposed or you're in that testing pool can you get those tests right now. Why? Because there's limited supplies. And we have to make sure that what we have lasts for, we don't know how long this virus will be with us. So we have to make sure that that lasts. On the other hand, our mayor has been giving out masks and testing kits all over the place. So if people were New Haven residents, they were also getting those things. One thing I must say, and I'm not bragging about Mayor Elicker, he's always asking or texting, how can I help? How are you? What's going on? And I'm always sharing with him what's going on. Dr. Jonah, Yesenia, Matt, all of those people have been listening and chiming in through text and what have you as we move through this difficult time. Now, I understand we cannot fight against what the legislators have in place. We have to have 180 days of school. We have to think of our high schoolers. If we don't have 180 days of school, their diplomas will not be worth anything, really, to be honest with you. So unless there are changes to executive order, we cannot offer remote learning as some people may want to think and may believe that the superintendent or the board has a charge to do that. We don't. So until there are changes that come in that aspect, we can't do that. But in the meantime, that should not stop us from supporting our students and their learning in whatever way possible. And we're going to continue to make sure that we do the best we can under the circumstances. We already have a lot of learning loss. We have seen it. We know it is happening. We have had a lot of disruptions with having to quarantine students. And I'm not going to say much more than that because Director Bond is going to seg you into talking about test and stay and all these different things. So before we get to Director Bond, we have a thing we always do. We show, and the two new members of the board need to see this, what our vision and mission are for New Haven Public School. Ms. Keisha Hannons or Dr. White, whoever has it, please show that. This is what we are going by, no matter what. See, it's about these little ones in the middle there. And we have our core values, equitable opportunities, high expectations, even in the midst of COVID, collaboration, and I hope to collaborate with the new union leadership and new board members, a culture of continuous improvement. That's what we're aiming at. And we want to make sure that all students in New Haven Public Schools are helped with personalized, authentic, and engaging learning experiences through creativity, exploration, innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, and high quality instruction. And we believe that. Our vision is that New Haven becomes one of the best school systems in the nation, and it can be. I strongly believe it can be. We have the staff to do it. We just have to pull up our sleeves and do the best we can with whatever circumstances we have. Our priorities are academic learning, youth, family, community engagement, operational efficiencies, culture and climate, and talented educators. On all those fronts, thank you, Ms. Annans and Dr. White, whoever was sharing that, thank you so much. We believe that we can do this with Dr. Joyner at the helm with teaching and learning and all these different pieces. We can do this. We have people going around right now through Gemma's office trying to find our students who are absent. Because as Dr. Joyner always stated, you can't teach an empty chair. So they're trying to find where these students are. We've had a number of students who have not shown up to school. So now I want to turn this over to Director Bond, who will talk to us about some COVID plans that we have in play that's coming up through the pipe. Director Bond, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. I'm just gonna project my slides and make sure that everyone can see them. Slideshow in the beginning. Display settings. All right, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Tracy. And I think everyone shares in the same sentiments about the health and safety of the children and obviously our staff to ensure that we can remain open. We have been fighting this war against the pandemic now for 2 years. And it has been a pleasure collaborating with the Board of Ed and the New Haven Public School System to ensure that we remain open, but not just remain open, but we have set a precedent across Connecticut on setting a standard for safety. And we have done that through a number of mitigation strategies. Today and this evening, my goal is to talk about our test and stay process that we have developed in collaboration with the administration to ensure that we can continue to remain in schools and be able to ensure that we're not having a disruptive process, but ensuring that with the most latest best practices that are happening within the New England County area is being implemented and considered here within our respective school district. We're going to talk a little bit about our test kit distribution plan that was actually alluded to earlier, and talk a little bit about what our active cases and illustrate what our workflows are in regards to protocols. And so for us, the Test and Stay initiative is something that we have adopted from the Massachusetts Test and Stay pilot program. And it's a mechanism to ensure that we are providing testing for those eligible children who have been exposed and are able to be exempt as long as they remain asymptomatic from close contacts that they have had. And so what we developed is 3 different tiers of protocols and categories to ensure that the teachers and administrators have the ability to ensure that they can isolate individuals that are positive or symptomatic, and then quarantine anyone that falls into the criteria, but most importantly, be able to have individuals that are within the category of being able to stay in school, that are fully vaccinated and are able to stay by having access to rapid antigen testing. And so we worked really hard to develop protocols of different categories so that we know where the children or staff can fall under and be able to quickly work efficiently to ensure that this process is in place. We are working closely on procuring testing kits through a combination of the state and what was supplied through the city. And as mentioned, we developed the eligibility criteria to receive that test kit. And so those that are experiencing symptoms with COVID-19 will have access to test kits. Children that test positive and are required to return back to school within the new protocols and have not met the fully vaccinated series need to have access to the rapid test kits, or those that are fully vaccinated and we need to and are eligible to remain in school as long as they do not have symptoms, can have test kits for 5 consecutive testing days so that they can be able to remain in schools. And we also are providing families that may have test kits, children at home that need to be able to have access, may have had exposure over a weekend or have developed symptoms over a weekend and need to pick up a test kit, will be notified and arrange within the respective school administrators or designee to be able to provide testing outside of the school. And so these are all mechanisms that are in place and will go into effect as of Monday. As you know, one of the things that we did in order for us to remain open previously is to conduct task force inspections that consist of a number of key department heads of health department staff, building department, and fire marshals to ensure that ventilation systems and other mechanisms are in place. And also, of course, the utilization of face masks and also the availability of hand sanitation. To date, we have inspected 20 schools and have notified those recommendations so that the superintendent can meet with the respective schools of any corrective actions that need to take into place. It is important for us to remain guarded. As I mentioned, we are still at war with this pandemic. We're dealing with the Omicron variant. It is highly contagious, but what we do know is that we have mitigation strategies in place. And so it is important for administrators, staff to remain guarded, ensure that the mitigation strategies are being enforced at every single level, and especially with our young children, and having corrective behavior changes when masks are not being adhered to, because we know that these mechanisms can work. And so we will continue to, with the remaining 20 schools, to ensure that we are monitoring closely and supporting the opening and remaining opening of our schools. We are still also working very closely on student and staff case reporting protocols. Those protocols are still in place. I know that we have had a series of questions and concerns from the public. And so we want to reiterate that we are closely monitoring our cases and have a dashboard that has been put in place since we opened schools. And so what you see in front of you is our total student and staff cases that go from Sunday through Sunday, and are closely monitoring that by school and working closely with the school administrators on any mitigation strategy corrections that need to take into consideration on some of the things that we're finding. I want to commend the administration as well as the staff at each of the schools on working collectively, as well as Eric Wachowski, who is working diligently around the clock so that we can be efficient on mitigating, isolating, and quarantining those that need it. The staffing reporting protocols have remained the same. This workflow is just an illustration so that you can see that this is still in place. This is available on our websites. And so just want to make sure that people understand that the protocols have not changed. We are actively working together collectively, making sure that their reporting protocols are forms are being followed and adhered to so that we can be able to work together. We are also working on contact tracing. We have specific contact tracing on the student side that is supported by school nurses, and also staff tracing that is closely monitored with administrators so that we can be able to isolate and quarantine accordingly. One of the things that we're working closely with Dr. Tracy is offering technical webinars with the New Haven Public School families this coming week. We want to make sure that families feel safe, and so we will be providing a technical webinar this week and be able to provide any questions and answers for families on how we're implementing our test to stay protocols. We're also going to be working with our administrators and detailing it out so that administrators can adopt to the new test and stay protocols, and then also working closely with the school administration on promoting vaccines and boosters. We know that vaccines saves lives. We want to make sure that we try to work closely with reducing the risk of hospitalizations. This past week, I reported during our media conference press conference that we had 17 pediatric children in hospital that were hospitalized out of our 400 plus cases, and 5 pediatric cases being in an ICU. That can be avoided, and we can have milder symptoms when we're vaccinated and boosted. So I urge families to get your children vaccinated and get your children boosted for those that are eligible. And we want to continue to promote that together so that we can remain in school and have a positive learning environment. We are working closely on disseminating and promoting the test kits. And one of the things that we wanted to do is develop instructional videos that were both English and Spanish. And so we have a Spanish instructional video voiceover that we were able to work on that's also available and being promoted so that we can be able to ensure that literacy is at the forefront and that parents know when to take the test and how to take the test. And we are also working on developing an isolation and quarantining video because we want to try to reduce any super spreaders within households, and how to safely isolate and safely quarantine is very critical so that we cannot disrupt the households as a whole, so that parents can continue to work and children can also return to school safely. And so with that, I'm going to yield the floor back to our superintendent and open it up to any questions that the board of members may have.
Thank you so much, Director Bond. We're going to hold all questions till after the presentations. Or no, I should not say that. So we can let Director Bond get to go. Any questions to Director Bond?
Director Bond, that was a lot to take in. I just want to make sure that we point out the important things that I think people are particularly interested in. And correct me if I'm wrong here, because I just want to make sure the information is accurate. So for teachers and staff, we are providing N95 masks every 5 business days. So those masks are supposed to last for 5 business days, and we will work to resupply a new tranche of N95 masks. For teachers and staff who are symptomatic or have a known COVID exposure, we're facilitating New Haven Public Schools having tests available and have been doing so. And I presume that's been going well. I've been getting general feedback that that's been going well. So if teachers and staff are symptomatic or have been exposed to COVID, they can get those rapid tests so that they can identify if they have COVID, and if not, get back to work. And if so, keep themselves and others safe. For students, it's the same. If students are symptomatic or have a known COVID exposure, we are providing rapid tests. Now, the important thing, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but because I want to make sure the details are right, we intend to implement now test and stay starting next week. And test and stay, so currently unvaccinated children, if they're exposed, they have to quarantine. What test and stay is if they get rapid tests for 5 days and continue to be asymptomatic, they can continue to come to school. Director Bond, that's correct?
Correct. And so thank you, Mayor. And it is a lot of information, and that's the reason why we're going to offer the technical webinars on test and stay to both families this week as well as administrators. So that because it is a lot of information and we want to make sure that it's understood. So test and stay is a duration of 7 days from exposure. Close contacts can remain in school and do not have to quarantine as long as they are asymptomatic, meaning they have no symptoms, must wear a mask and adhere to the mask requirements unless they're eating or drinking, and must remain social distance from others. Take a rapid antigen test for 5 consecutive days. As long as the test remains negative, they can return to school. And when the 5-day interval of testing is not feasible, which at this time it is, we will consider it a 1 or 3 day testing. At this time, we haven't made an assessment and a decision to provide it for 5 consecutive days and continue to do active monitoring of symptoms.
So we believe at the moment we have enough test kits to implement 5 days. And I think what's important for people to understand is that the state has been recommending screen and stay, which is basically no testing. So this is more robust than the states. The CDC is recommending test and stay, where there are, I believe, only 2 times that individuals get tested. So this is much more robust than both the CDC's recommendations and the state's recommendations. Every day for those 5 days, students get tested to identify quickly if they have COVID. And obviously they don't come to school if they test positive, but this is a way for us to facilitate safely children remaining in school.
Sure.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Director Bond. So let me go into.
Dr. Tracy, hold on. Mr. Wilcox has a
Oh.
question.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. One is the presentation, Director Bond's presentation, just requested it get posted with the meeting materials for this meeting on the district website, since it was a late edition and it hasn't been posted already. And the second thing is that there was some COVID district information presented, a dashboard, which looks more complete than our current dashboard on the district website. So my question is, where's that information kept, and is it going to be something that'll be reflected on our site?
We can have the similar. We always have to look through to make sure we're not inadvertently providing too detailed information to identify a person, but there is a sweet spot between the 2 versions that we're working to get to.
Thank you.
Dr. Jordan?
You're muted.
This has always been a public relations campaign, and I appreciate what the mayor and the director, one of our own, I might add, the Department of Public Health is doing, along with Dr. Tracy and Jim and Joseph Lumpkin. We really do have to get this out in all the spaces that people inhabit, so that they'll know exactly, and in user-friendly terminology. But then the real question that I'm asking of the staff is, how do we deal with non-compliance? Because that seems to be a problem in a lot of places. And it doesn't take a whole bunch of it to create a problem. So Dr. Tracy, I don't know if you can respond to that.
Non-compliance in terms of mask wearing, you're referring to, Doctor?
Any of the safety programs.
Any of the things?
Yeah, because we're relying on parents to test their kids at home. And you and I both know that sometimes parents would have a tendency to send their kids to school even when they know they're sick. Some parents, not all. And so any violation of these protocols really create problems for the entire school. And so I think we have to get on top of that in a preemptive way if we can.
I guess Mary Ellicot's taking a shot at that.
Yeah, I actually have, Dr. Joyner, as you can imagine, we have talked a lot about that in our ability to track 20,000 students. Obviously not 20,000 are going to be exposed, but it's a lot of students that have been quarantined over many months. And then our ability to actually test ourselves, which our school nurses are already totally overwhelmed. And at the end of the day, parents are sending their kids in on occasion that are symptomatic, and we don't have total control over these things. And we landed on that we have to trust that families, because of the social contract, are going to do the right thing here. And ultimately, I think in many ways, that's the best that we can do. It's vital, just like people are coming to work, that parents and families do not send their children in if they're symptomatic. But we just don't have the capacity to implement the kind of massive testing in our schools with our existing staff, because we're already very short-staffed with nurses to do that. And we felt like the issue would exist even if we were doing that some families, on occasion will send their kids in when they probably shouldn't be. And so this is, I think we went back and forth a lot on whether to be super rigid, but we think we won't be able to implement a program like this if we are. And we're all becoming more comfortable with the idea of rapid tests at home and people self-identifying when they have a problem. It's the perfect can't be the enemy of the good here.
Yarborough?
Hold on, get my computer together, hold on. I was dying, yeah. So Dr. Jonah, did that?
Dr. Yarborough had his hand up. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh,
I think Dr. Tracy, you're responding to Dr. Joyner?
no, I was saying if that satisfies his question.
Well, I certainly agree that the perfect can't be the enemy of the good, because there's no such thing as perfection, and that satisfies mine.
Thank you.
First, I want to express, I have two questions. I want to express appreciation to Director Bonds for your strategy, your leadership, and your collaboration with the school board, with the school system, and really leading the city. I appreciate your attention to detail and also your thoughtfulness and really being scientific and also thinking through a lens of public health, which is about behavior around how we actually tackle the challenges that are in front of us and thrive. And I say two questions. One, Dr. Joyner, your question made me think whether or not the school system or the city is in collaboration with employers or just having conversations with employers or parents who may be concerned about how a quarantine affects their employment and ability to provide for their family, and whether or not, I don't know that there's a financial exchange that can happen, but if there's some conversation around it so that maybe some of those competing tensions, if there are any, can be relieved. And my second question is, I think I heard, Dr. Barnes, you mentioned that there are 17 out of 400 pediatric cases of students who are hospitalized, and that there are 5 in ICU. And my question is just, how are they doing? Thinking about that as a parent, yeah.
And I think that's one of the things, I can certainly follow up the hospital and just get an update. So we had about 423 patients that were hospitalized and, got the pediatric numbers. And I think one of the things we have to continue to stress is that it's avoidable if vaccinated. One of the things that we know the vaccines are providing is milder symptoms. And I want to just emphasize that message for any families that are listening. And I know that it's hard as a parent that you have a new vaccine that just comes out and you don't want something in your child's body that may impact them, and not knowing the long-term effects. But we also do not know the long-term effects of COVID. And we're starting to see that that there are some issues that are going to be lingering for those that are impacted. And then to your first question, I think the mayor can perhaps answer the question, because we work a lot around messaging that we ask employers to try to work with their employees. And, that's something that's really tough when we are dealing with a surge and dealing with the impact of cases to this level. Is we're always sort of pleading with businesses and local employers to work with their employees, because we know that we can only work this together. And so it is sort of a push and pull and a challenge when trying to work through a surge to this magnitude.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, if I may just add, I think just from the early on in the pandemic throughout, we've been trying to push through different mechanisms through the chamber and our economic development department, employers to be more compassionate about employees being sick, employees taking care of someone that's sick, child care issues. And I mean, I could say from my own personal experience, it's really challenging when your child is home and you're, as a parent, I'm trying to juggle, and my wife is trying to juggle how we kind of manage childcare and 2 full-time jobs. So we do push that. If there's a way that we can do that on a more comprehensive kind of a strategic way. I'm very open to it, but we do, it's vital that employers have more compassion when and not put families in this impossible situation of, do I send my child to school that has a sniffle and I'm not quite sure because I have to go to work?
Yeah, thank you. And do we know about the well-being of the children in the ICU or in the hospital?
I'm going to inquire and get an update for certain.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So
I'm sorry, Mayor, can I jump off? I just didn't want to
yes, thank you,
okay.
thank you, Director
Thank
Bond.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank you.
safe.
See you tomorrow.
Yes, I'm sure.
So attendance report, students/staff. This has said the students, when I'm putting students/staff, we want to give a quick report of comparing December to where we are now with student absences. That's a challenge we're faced with right now with the number of students that are absent, whether or not parents decide, whether it was COVID or parents decide just not to send them to school during this time. Dr. Sherbin is going to do that, followed by Ms. Hannons will share some of the couple of days of staff absences. So Dr. Sherbin, is Dr. Sherbin on here? Yes,
I'm here,
there
Dr.
she is. Dr. Michelle Sherbin. Go ahead, Doc.
Good evening, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen so that the public can also see the report that was included in with the board materials. And what you can see here is what we represented was all the days in December and the first 3 days of January, giving you a breakdown of the total absences by absence code and the percent absent. And what you can see is that for the month of December, we went from a low of 10% on the 1st to a high of 31% on the 23rd, which was the half day right before Christmas break. But that for that first week in January, that we had a third of our students absent from school. So 29 to 34%. Many of the students, we don't know the reason. And that would be that column that's AU, those are those unexcused absences. So we don't know if this is COVID. We could probably guess that we have a large portion of the students who were ill. You also have just a brief explanation of those attendance codes. AE, those are excused absences. So those may be illnesses where the parents have identified illness. HX is also excused. These are students that we know were put into homebound. That's what the H stands for. OS, those are out of school suspensions. As I said before, AU is unexcused, and the HA is also a homebound absence code that was used. And I did a little average of the first week of December to compare to that first week of January. And for that first week of December, we had over 2,000, we averaged 2,154 students absent. And for that first week in January, we saw a very steep increase with an average of over 6,000 students absent each day, so 6,143. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to address those. I'm going to take down the sharing so that it's easier for you to see each other.
So thank you, Dr. Sherbin.
Dr. Tracy, Dr. Benitez has a question.
Yes, Dr. Sherbin, good evening. I have a question. Have you been able to compare how these numbers look in years like 2019, 2020, prior to the pandemic? How is that different from 2021? And is it really much higher? We do know, we always hear that our students don't come back until after Three Kings Day. And I'm sure it wasn't 5,000 a few years back, but it will be a good record of information to show that there is a difference.
Very good question, Dr. Benitez. I have not done that comparison. I didn't want to compare it to last year because, as the board knows, we were still all remote at this time last year. But I can certainly go back to years prior to the pandemic for you and report on that.
The other challenge we have could be that because we had so many people substituting, that the attendance may not have been taken. Is something we have to look at too. That's a possibility. And then many students, when they come in tardy, we go back and mark them present. So Gemma is going to send out a survey around that. And many students who may be absent due to doctor's appointments because of COVID. So we have to dig deep into that. My big concern is that what is happening instructionally for those students. We need to find where they are and provide whatever supports we need to provide for families. That's a concern. Okay, so the next one is Ms. Hannans, please share with the board to show how we do that interactive look at staff every day at 4 o'clock in the morning when everybody's drawing snore.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to speak before the board tonight. So Dr. Tracy talked about our staff attendance sheet and what we developed as we looked at staff attendance. I think it was in the middle of the week during the break, Dr. Tracy and I were in a conversation around, we need to know what the data is going to look like. We were anticipating the staffing shortage as the COVID surge was increasing throughout the city. So I sent this spreadsheet out during the break, and our principals completed information into the spreadsheet. And the reason why we had them document the staff absences in the spreadsheet was simply because our current frontline ASOP system is only for teachers. And so we needed the full picture of understanding, what coverage may or may not look like within a particular building and where best to align our resources in reference to substitutes, but also our administrators in central office. And so you can see school by school, a breakdown, principals inputted this data for us. You may have as low as 2 teachers out. And as you go to maybe the high schools, you may see 23 that we had out at Hill House one day, 20 at ESUMS. Total staff looking across at Hill House on January 3rd, that was that Monday, you see the 29 staff members. You go down to Wilbur Cross, you see 30, but you also see numbers that were pretty high at Fairhaven, 24, Dr. Mayo School, 26, Brennan Rogers, 23. And we always had a summary sheet of what was the total across the district. So on that Monday, when we say 17 administrators, we're saying school level administrators. So assistant principals and principals. And so in some of our schools, for example, Edgewood, both the assistant principal and principal was out. And so we track this every day. This was Tuesday, January 4th at 4 a.m. It usually starts with Doc and I on a conversation, and then we're sending emails out to cabinet. Everybody's working. We have HR involved in this, trying to allocate our resources. Assistant Superintendent Velasquez is looking at the academic team. Who can she help deploy out to our schools? Tiffany Jackson is also looking at her department and saying, who are administrators or teachers with 092 that can possibly be deployed to help out in a particular schools. And naturally, the assistant superintendents for instructional leadership, we're in constant communication with our principals, figuring out who needs coverage and who can cover their building internally. And so every day, as Docus gave you the total, the 515 on Tuesday, on Wednesday, you know, that was the day of the freezing rain. We went up to 624 on that day. We will say, and then we already started for this week that we're currently in now. That's for Tuesday, but for today, when the day ended, we were at 410 staff members out for the day. So still very high, but we feel like it's going in the right direction. What we can say to everyone, you know, this is not sustainable over time. For us to continue to do our job and cover schools, we're not able to do the jobs that we've been hired to do, but we do it for our kids. We do it because we want to be there for our kids, but it did definitely take a toll on all of us. I just want to echo Dr. Tracy's words and sentiments on commending our staff for just stepping up to the plate, those that were there to ensure that our students were in the best environment possible for them, given the constraints. And to all the administrators, kudos to all of you for just continuing to push forward. No one will ever know really what happens behind the scenes when all this is going, but it was a truly team effort. And I'm proud to work in New Haven Public Schools as a result of it. And finally, I'll end with, to my fellow educators around the state, I will be in Black in solidarity with you as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Allen. I'm always in Black, so I guess I'll
Wednesday, wearing our Black.
Okay, so thank you for presenting that report, Dr. Sherman and Ms. Hannans. It's truly a team effort on our part. NHPS resignation data. This is Matt's favorite piece. So we have it there for John Wynn. John Wynn is one of our assistant principals at, I think it's Co-op High School, and he's also a data-driven person. So he has worked with Lisa Mack in coming up with showing the resignation data, because that seemed to have been a hot topic, that we were losing a lot of teachers. So they're going to share some comparison information with us very quickly. Mr. Wynn.
Okay, I'm going to share the first screen here with our teacher resignations. We've had 716 resignations since 2017 of July. And during that time, in 2019, 2020, we had the most resignations in August, probably because of Dr. Tracy's predecessor during that time. And there were a lot of resignations during that year. And then if you compare it to this year, that's where we are as of December, we're below during that, but during this time we have a few months that is a little bit higher in December. If you want to compare it to other years, just by months, we have August as being one of the highest months, and June also being near the end of the year we have it. And if you do by subject area, we have it by subject area. SPED is the leader in this case since 2017, and math is also a high subject area. If you do it by months, in the month of August, it's usually SPED is the leader. And then by the end of the school year, the 51 to 95, you have mostly math and science as the leaders there. If I scroll through each individual year, we have it for this year. Again, SPED in third grade are the leading subject areas, and 43 is the highest in August. Then in 2020 and 2021, we had more resignations near the beginning of near the end of the school year, we had the most there. And then from 2019, 2020, as I mentioned before, we had the highest resignation during that month, heading into the school year. And then from 2018, 2019, we've had the resignations pretty even throughout for the month of August and in June. And again, through 2017, 2019, we have SPED in science over here. So that's it for that.
So you're saying that the highest the highest resignation we had was in 2019-20 or 2018-19, which of those?
2019,
2019, yeah. That was it at 168, correct?
Yes,
And today we're currently at what, 146?
yes. I'll bring it back up there.
I just want to look at the yearly total.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So 146 and then that 153.
Okay. Thank you. So in other words, the data is showing that we are normally, New Haven Public Schools, every year, we lose normally around 150 or so every year coming in, and then we replaced, and then we have another 150 the next year going out, and then we replace. So that's been New Haven Public School. Now, the question that arises from that is then what can we do to prevent people from leaving New Haven Public Schools? Now that's for a deeper dive as to what we can do to retain staff here for not going different places. We know that from information we have on hand that some people relocate. Some people move on to a higher paying job. Some people have left because of they do not like the working condition that they're in, and they get better offers someplace and leave. So we've seen those different reasons why people leave New Haven Public Schools. And in talking with other superintendents, they're experiencing the same thing, having a lot of vacancies still not filled. And it's the same thing here in New Haven. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you. Yeah. I'm not the chair of the board. Where is Yesenia? I'm taking over here. Go ahead, Dr. Yesenia.
Right here. Go ahead, Dr. Joyner.
I'd like to, I actually ran the largest teacher prep program in the state when I was director of it at Sacred Heart University. And I think that one, I want to commend John Nguyen and Lisa Mack for this report. It's the first that I've ever seen. I've been on the board for 6 years. And I think it's very rich in terms of at least some data that are available to us. And maybe we can create a retention. What I'm going to suggest is that we create a retention committee with human resources, president of all three unions. And I would hope that because of her recent experience, that we could appoint Abby Benitez as a chair of that committee. Because first of all, only 4% of the teachers in the state are minorities. And there's a lot of data about why Black and brown people don't go into education anymore. First of all, they have more opportunities in other places. And secondly, some of the stuff that I talked about when I was teaching education majors was that a lot of, at least a study of Black students indicated that the salary was too low and that the kids were too disorderly. and I can share that report with you, that data with you. Sometimes we get people who can't get jobs anyplace else. That's real. But then when they can get jobs other places, they take them. I have a friend who was a principal in Fairfield County, and he told me he used to steal out teachers. And he's a dear friend of mine, so I didn't blame him because I used to steal people's teachers too when I could, but not during the middle of the year. I would try to get people to come back home and work. And a number of people did come back from the South. Keisha Red is an example of a person who was teaching down South and came back up. Joe Johnson is an example of that. Of course, we want to encourage our homegrown people to come back. We've got to figure out a way to provide more rewards and incentives for teaching. We have some of the best teachers in this country, and we pay some of the lowest salaries. And I know that's difficult, but if we can get a coalition of people to work together, like John Dow did years ago, to have the state provide more support for urban educators, then that will be a great legacy for this board, for this mayor, and for this superintendent. Because many of our people are here because they love this community. They want to make a difference. But that is not always the best incentive because I had a young teacher that I have so much respect for. I won't name the teacher, but I'll name the school. And she said, I question whether I'm still here, why I'm still here. She graduated from the school. And she is a first-class teacher. And we've got to figure out ways to provide them with more remuneration. We've got to figure out a way to provide them with a very supportive work climate. And we've got to let them know every day that we care about what they do, that what they do matters a great deal. And that's the only way, because of all the teachers I taught, I had about, in 8 years, I only had about 5 that said that they would teach in an urban environment. And I averaged about 100 kids a year. In terms of my teaching load, only 5. And of that 5, I think 1 was Black, 1 was brown, and they actually came to New Haven. Keisha hired one of them, and he stayed for about 2 years. Keisha, you know what I'm talking about, Michael? And I hope Pete Greco's still here, because he's a phenomenal teacher. But Mayor Elicker and Dr. Tracy and President Rivera, if we can figure that out, we will be doing a great service to urban education. We've got to do it, because they can't sustain this type of commitment under these circumstances. And that's the urgency of our time as far as education is concerned.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Wilcox? Mr. Wilcox?
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank the staff for pulling this information together. This is something that I've been interested in, and it is, you know, obviously it's of concern when you look at the data that we're approaching what our annual high has been over the last several years, and we're only mid-year through. But then we also understand that this is probably, I mean, I'm not a high school or elementary school teacher, but must be the most difficult year to teach in any recent memory. And so I can see why people might be looking for something different during this time period. That's certainly the trends we're seeing across the country and in a lot of different industries. People rethinking life choices based on the realities that we're living in. I do hope that you know, this is something the Finance and Operations Committee has been looking at. If board members or community members or staff members have other ideas as to what else we should be looking at, we certainly can do that. I think one thing that this shows is that the district is more than willing to be transparent about this data and to have these conversations. And I hope that we can have them moving forward, maybe in some organized fashion, but just to try to figure out what are those things that are going to keep people here in spite of the tremendous difficulties. And then, of course, we're going into a contract negotiation year. Maybe some things will come from that as well. In the end, it's going to also boil down to the dollars that come into the district to pay for this stuff. And unless we see more of those dollars coming in, it's going to be difficult to do a lot of financial incentives, which just makes it all the more important to have a good, respectful workplace so that people want to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. And so I must shout out to those teachers, even the ones we just talked about who retired after 37 or so years. I don't think you will find that for a long time. We have many teachers who are on the 26th year mark and 25, 26 years, and they're still here hanging on because they believe in these children. They believe in the work that they do. So we want to commend all of those who have been working in New Haven systems for such a long time, and have given a lot. And for the newcomers who are coming in, you know, understanding that New Haven Public Schools it's a great system to work with. And New Haven Public Schools is all of us together. It is not central office. It is not the Board of Education. It's everybody who constitutes New Haven Public Schools. And we're going to work together to make it the best place for our students and for our staff to work in. What's in our hands, we will use it. What's in our control, we will make sure we work with what we can do. What's outside of our control, we can't control that, but we can surely make the environment a place where people really want to be. So next up is, and we want to close out very quickly. We want to have the update on school threats. I think that should have been deleted because we did the school threats before, and that has subsided. And COVID testing, Dr. White, Director Bond took that piece. So we're going to move into the budget update. Miss Linda Hannans. Can't hear you, Miss Hannans.
You're muted, Ms. Hannans.
I was so worried about sharing the screen, I forgot to push the unmute button. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay. Okay. And I think this is what I want over here. Oh, okay. I'm doing something wrong, right?
No, you're not.
Thank you. That's my last screen.
Click on the first slide. Click on the first slide that you're on.
Okay. Okay. I did it. Okay. What we did last week was our first presentation for the to show you where we are on our projections with the available funds that we have. And basically the first slide, of course, is just the slide that tells you what we're presenting. The second slide goes into the core values, which always drive everything we do in the district. On slide number 3, it just basically, this was just for historical data where I was showing the budget versus what we had requested and what the initial difference was. Now, this was done back in last fiscal year. And as you know, working with budgets, they're always a moving target. So secondly, what I did was I just said, the work done during the summer, we were able to, align new funding sources with various expenses that we were anticipating. And based on these budget mitigation plans that were done over the summer, we were able to project the shortfall currently to be at 3.9%. I mean, $3.9 million, excuse me. Let's see. Okay. On page 8 of the report that's coming up now, it will show the current projected expenses for 2021-22, which is this current year. I just want to point out that these numbers reflect the actual expenses to date plus anticipated expenses for the full year based on current obligations. That's our encumbrances that we have on file and some historical data that we know about. As we can see from the data, you'll see from the data when it's presented was that the main cost drivers are still the salaries, tuition, and transportation. Okay, I'm going to just jump down to this slide here, which just tells you how to read the report. And then I'm going to jump into the report itself. And as you can see, it breaks out the salaries. And of course, we were expecting a deficit in our salary lines as always. And then the other cost drivers we're showing are the tuition and the transportation costs. You do see where there may be some cost savings in other areas. And we're looking at that on a daily basis. Some of the cost drivers, as I just mentioned, I jumped too quick, but the 75% of the general fund costs are always basically in the personnel, the out of district, and the tuition. Some of the cost drivers that hit us this fiscal year was that they had salary increases of 2%, at least 2%. Some of these costs we had planned on using the ARP-ESSER funds to cover some of these costs, but we have since found out that you cannot use those funds to replace current expenditures. So what we've done was that to alleviate some of the things that we were looking at, we completed a full review of the full-time staff, and we made sure that everybody was in the right place, in the right building, because you can't really start a budget until you make sure that all your ducks are in a row. So that's what we did first. And we worked with the school principals. We met with each school principal and we went over their staffing rosters. So we now have that in place. Now what we're also doing is that we, as new hires come in, HR would check with us first to see whether they can hire the person at this rate, or we're trying to make sure that we don't like lose a teacher for like say 45,000 and then bring in a new teacher for say 85,000. So we've been working hand in hand with HR to cover, to make sure that doesn't happen. Also on a monthly basis, we're looking at all open purchase orders now to make sure that things are just not hanging out there. And that schools have received their supplies that they ordered in September. And if they haven't, we're going in and checking with the vendor to see whether that is actually coming and or whether the school still actually needs it at this point. And we did a lot of that with the summer. So we were able to reduce some of those open purchase orders for summer school because as we all know, summer school is over with now. So if there were back orders, we don't need those. So we've been clearing up our back orders. We're also getting ready to start looking at the tuition costs for some savings opportunities to see whether, because the tuition was based on historical data. So now we're looking at to see whether we are actually going to need these services and to what cost. We're continuing to maximize grants wherever possible without supplanting. And then also, I just wanted to give us a word of caution that while we're actively working to mitigate the deficit on a daily basis, I must caution that the projection number is based on current expenses and subject to change. It does not include unforeseen expenses or emergencies that may occur. Let's see. Okay. I think I've done everything. So now I can open it up to questions if there are any.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hannons. President Yesenia Rivera had to step out momentarily, so she asked me to chair in her absence. So that's just an explanation of why I'm talking now. Okay. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Let's see here. Mayor Elicker.
So we're looking at like a $4 million deficit right at the moment. Is that right?
Yes.
So I just want to encourage you to really dig deep as far as what is eligible regarding the federal funds.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of activities in whether it's overtime or Dr. Tracy referenced paying teachers to cover, for example, what they would normally use as their prep time. I would imagine there's a lot of activities that could potentially be covered by that funding, and that $4 million deficit with all this additional funding coming into the schools would be very unfortunate to end the year.
And we are looking at that. I just requested the substitutes, if we've had any substitutes for the first and second quarter, because we're really going into the third quarter now. So I've asked that they get us those invoices. The same thing if we have any bus aides, the bus aides were budgeted. So if they have any of those types of things, we're also working with staff to make sure that they get the first and second quarter of all expenditures that could go to ESSER to make sure that we get them on to ESSER.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? I'll just add a question or a comment on my part is that we have the Finance and Operations Committee. We did discuss this at our last meeting, and we're going to be getting updates monthly on this. And we did ask for what the mitigation plan is, in addition to whatever being able to charge to federal grants and so on, but also, if not, what we're going to do to be able to reduce this budget down, hopefully to zero. So I would be remiss to point out if we knew we were going to have this issue. The district had a plan in place to try to mitigate it, but partially this was because, we asked for a certain amount of funds and we're working with what we have. And so hopefully we can continue to do that. But and hopefully we'll be able to have a nice budget season this year as we're also planning the next year, because these costs aren't going away.
Yes, we did have, I must mention that, and I probably did already, that we did have money budgeted in this grant to cover, I guess, salary cost. And I think it was to the tune of $4.4 million. I understand that was denied by the state. They said they weren't going to cover the deficit. So that's what really threw these numbers out of whack.
State's just loving to deny us these days.
You
Dr.
know,
Benitez.
So I was just gonna ask to Ms. Hannans. Good evening. It's great to hear you and see you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I am thinking that we have always been very supportive of our students, and we do provide a lot of things that will, with ESSER, would be additional for some districts that do not provide those things. But I am wondering if by looking at how we are doing more of what we already did because of their circumstance, that might be might make things more allowable. Also, I'm thinking that if we approach the cost not as a way to shorten our deficit, but to address the needs of the kids due to the pandemic, it might be, and of course we can talk offline about that kind of thing, but I'm hoping that we can look at it in a different way so that you can use ESSER funds for most of what you're trying to do this year. Definitely you are having a very difficult time in providing the support students have for academics and for emotional support, and even that SEL component should qualify for ESSER funding. So it's a way to look at it differently. I'm just wondering if that's possible and if we can support you with that.
Yes, no, we've been doing a lot of those things for, you know, like looking at the grants, because my past experience, of course, is in the grant field. So we basically know what we can and cannot do with a lot of the grants. What happened too, I must caution everyone, is that when we received these ESSER funds, and we were thinking, okay, like people think, you know, and I don't want, maybe I'm using the wrong terminology, but we have quite a bit of money coming in for these particular grants, but we have to make sure that we're staying within the guidelines of the grant, and which means that the things that would normally be covered under the regular general fund local grant, that we don't reduce those, because they are going to be looking at later on during the year. They are going to be, I don't know when, but they did have Dr. Tracy sign off a statement of insurances, which indicated that we would not take money that we would normally get from local dollars and use the ESSER fund, because they're going to be comparing apples to oranges, or apples to apples, I guess, to make sure that we didn't, that if the school had, like, say, X amount of dollars for supplies, that they were still allowed to have those funds for the supplies. So we have to be very, very careful with these federal dollars. But we, like you said, we can talk, and wherever there are ways that we can use these funds within the regulations and within the guidelines and the way the grant was written, believe me, that's what we are doing and will continue to do.
And most of these funds that we have, that we're getting, we spend them, they have to be COVID related. And a lot of the special funds that we receive have been going into COVID related things like PPEs and before after school programs, summer school things, all of those things, HVAC systems. So we're spending a lot on those, and social emotional learning. So it's all spelled out how these monies are to be used. But these are not the only grants. We have other grants that we can look at that do not have these level of restrictions. So we're really looking hard. One of the things we know, we cannot and will not cut staff, because right now in this COVID time, what you need is more staff and not less. So, and 75% of the general funds is really staff or personnel, and we cannot even think about cutting that, period. So, but we'll continue to look. That's what we're here for. And thanks, Abby, for coming aboard, and Dr. Yarborough. We put our heads together and make sure that we do the best we can with what we have. I always say do the best we can with what we have. So far, we've been able to close out 2 years. 2 years not having a deficit. So we're going to try to work hard on that this year too. I think that Matt, you're still. Oh, you're sitting there.
I guess I need to relinquish control.
Yeah.
Especially.
You did a good job, Matt.
Thank
So
you.
that's our budget update. If there are no questions, I guess there are no questions, no further questions or comments on the budget. No, and we are also in the process of preparing what next year's budget would look like. So that's coming. Summation, looking ahead. I must say my greatest determination right now is to get back on track, to focus on students learning. I am pained in my heart that is an aspect that is not going so well right now with our students because of this current circumstances. And we have to try the best we can to put the focus back on the learning of our students, what is happening to them. I'm glad Dr. Yarborough asked about what's happening in ICU. On the health side, to me, this is ICU on the academic side and what it is we're doing to support the learning. And I know the staff is trying very, very hard. But we have to look at ways when I see that we have third graders or second graders just learning their letters or numbers or what have you, that is heart-rending to me and so having said that, I am not one who really wants to go back to remote learning because it may have worked for some, but it hasn't worked for some. So I want to make sure that our students are getting direct instruction from their teachers and that the teachers have the tools and resources to do that. And we have to continue to show that level of care and compassion for our families and our students as we work with them to bring them back up to speed. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time, but children don't have all that much time because they're growing every day and they're moving on. And it's hard to keep moving them up the ladder, up the different grades, knowing they have not mastered the skills that they need to move on. We see the struggle with ninth graders right now in the high school. They missed what, 7th and 8th grade practically? Some of them have just started setting foot back in school after 2 years out. That's difficult for our kids. The adjustment in school is difficult for them. I was in a high school today. The couple of them are the ones walking because the halls, because it's hard for them to sit there learning 9th grade content when they have missed out 7th and 8th grade. That's very difficult for our children. So, well, one good story I'm going to end on. I was in a high school today walking with the principal. We got to a classroom and the classroom was so quiet. The students are all well behaved. And so I peeked in believing that the teacher was in the back of the room somewhere. No, I said, "Where's your teacher?" The young lady said to me, "She's not here, but we're fine. We've got this." They were sitting there like there was a teacher sitting there somewhere in the classroom, all quiet and doing their own thing, whatever that was, until the principal told them, no, you needed to be at such and such a place. But the whole idea that the students are adjusting to what is going on. Some have adjusted very well and some have not adjusted very well. And we need to keep those in mind. Our job is to keep them in school. Yes, they're challenging. Yes, they're giving problems, and we anticipated these things to happen. We just have to be patient and working, just like we're patient at home with our own children. And that's the level of where my heart is as we work with our young people. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. And Mr. Wilcox for taking over the meeting. Okay, so no questions. We'll move on to the Head Start report. Mr. Wilcox.
Thank you. I would brief on this. The next meeting is going to be on January 20th. We did meet last month. One thing I did want to point out to the board, two things actually. One is the Policy Council, which, as you recall, Head Start has, in addition to the board being a governing body, there's requirements for a parent body, the Policy Council, and they had at their last meeting 28 individuals representing people from all the different sites where we have Head Start classrooms. So a really good kickoff to their recruitment drive for getting a robust policy council that includes people from all the sites. And so I think that's good, great, especially since it's in COVID times and all the difficulties that brings. So that was good news. And the other one is plans are progressing on having the health clinic open up in the Mayo School. And so hopefully that is about to start. So that's the Head Start report.
You're on for a citywide school building committee report.
We meet this Thursday, and just as a reminder to everybody and to our new members, there is an extensive report that is posted on our meeting site for the citywide stewardship group, and that covers all the major issues in the district in terms of capital improvements and maintenance things that are progressing. So I invite everybody to take a look at that.
Finance and operations.
We've talked a lot about the finance and operations stuff already. Our next meeting is next Monday, and if people have agenda suggestions, please let me know by tomorrow, because we start the process of putting together the discussion item agenda.
You have a little bit of a break while Ms. Jackson talks about the governance report. Is she still on?
Yes, I'm still here. Thank you, President Rivera. So the last meeting that we had in the for the governance meeting, what we discussed is we had an up and coming meeting with CABE, the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. And in that meeting, we talked with them to really look at how we can update all of our policies. So we will be bringing forth a proposal to the board, really looking at some of the policies that we have and really a plan and how we can execute and update all of them while also adhering to some of the things that are relatively important in our in the district. So more to come on that, but that was the essence of the last governance meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Food Service Task Group.
And finally, we meet this Wednesday, and one of the interesting new additions on that agenda is something that has come along, which is a subgroup that's trying to address the food gaps when the district's not going to be able to provide meals and things for folks, ways to address that so that no child is going to go hungry during those times. And so that's one of those things that's been developing over months and has seen some big progress at different time points, and we're really trying to get a group together so that we can address these known issues.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Guys, I was not kidding when I was saying that Mr. Wilcox is like one of the most supportive people out there, and Dr. Joyner said one of the hardest working. So thank you, Mr. Wilcox. I know you have a lot with the committees on your plate. Hopefully we can get this a little more help now.
Well, with new members, that means new people to slot in there. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing that no further discussion or questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second emotion.
Okay, Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Dr. Donor,
Yes.
Dr. Yarborough,
Yes.
Dr. Benitez,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.